Coming up next, Commissioner Marcia Fowler to talk about Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. Hello and welcome to Picking Up the Pieces, where we dare to persevere and help young adults transition to adulthood. We'd like to welcome Commissioner Marcia Fowler to the show today to help us celebrate Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. We're very excited to have you here.
Thank you, Kim. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming. We start off our episodes on a little bit learning about you. Can you tell us about yourself?
I'm the newly appointed Commissioner of the Department of Mental Health. I was appointed in February of 2012, as I fondly remember the day after the Super Bowl loss, so I try not to pair those two things together. I have a long background in mental health, started as a mental health worker in inpatient units and went to graduate school and spent most of my private career working with kids in various capacities, and came back to the department. I've been there as Deputy Commissioner and recently appointed Commissioner, as I said, in February of 2012.
Okay, and how do you see your role there?
My role of the department is really to advance the agenda of the Patrick Murray administration, to advance the agenda of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, and to really enact the vision of the Department of Mental Health, which is to work in partnership with children, adolescents, families, adults, stakeholders, to provide excellent services, to engage in research around the prevention of mental health, and to really take cognizance and be aware of all issues of mental health as it relates to the citizens of the Commonwealth.
Fantastic. And you have a very varied, impressive background. Can you tell us how you came to this position?
I had been the Deputy Commissioner under Commissioner Leadhome, and in that position I oversaw all of the operations of the department, our community-based services, our inpatient services, our contracted services, and in that role I had an opportunity to participate in the redesign of our adult community mental health system. How the appointment occurs is that your name is put forward and you interview, and you're hopefully, and I'm very gratefully, was appointed by the governor.
Fantastic, fantastic. And you're here, you've got a ribbon on, you're here to celebrate Children's Mental Health Awareness Day and the month. Can you tell us why that's so important?
Well, mental health is very important, and children's mental health is just as important as physical health. And it's important that we bring awareness to children's mental health just in the same way as we bring awareness to physical health. Good mental health is inseparable from good physical health. And mental health for children goes beyond children. What we do to intervene and recognize and bring awareness to the issues for children who suffer from conditions related to mental health is equally important as what we do for adults. What we know about the prevalence data of mental health in children, we know that 1 in 5 children suffer from some type of mental health condition. We also know that 3/4 of adults that are diagnosed or that are experiencing mental health symptoms, 3/4 of those individuals are diagnosed as children. And half of those individuals are diagnosed by the age of 14.
Wow.
I'll just give you a couple of examples. Attention deficit disorder is diagnosed typically by age 5. Anxiety disorder is typically diagnosed by age 9. Wow. Conduct disorder, age 10. Oppositional defiant disorder, age 10. Depression, age 14. Substance abuse, early to late teens, and then schizophrenia, late teens to early adulthood. And those are the primary conditions that affect adults as well with mental health issues.
Right, so it's really, and it's bringing awareness to that, because not a lot of people, I mean, that's a staggering statistic.
It really is.
1 in 5
right.
of our children that might be sitting next to, if we have children sitting next to our child that might be in the playground with our children, and they need support in order to be successful young adults, to be successful successful adults. And the way we intervene is so critical, because if we intervene in the wrong way, we can squash potential, we can really do a lot of harm. But if we're able to support people in the right way.
Right.
DMH has some critical initiatives going on right now. Can you tell us about what you're doing to help support children and transition-age youth at this point?
Yeah, well, let me talk specifically about our STAY grant, which is a grant directed towards transitional age youth, and the STAY stands for Success of Transitional Age Youth. And that is a grant that's funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration Service from the U.S. government, which we finally refer to as SAMHSA.
Yes.
And I'll continue to refer to it as that. That's a grant that's really aimed at increasing access to services for transitional age youth, which we define as youth that are ages 16 to 25. What we saw over time, and we recognized this a long time ago, that age group tends to drop out of services much more frequently as they transition from kid services into adult services. When the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative developed over the last several years, and we started collecting more data, we realized that the age group between 14 and 18, in comparison to the percentage of kids that were eligible for services, it was really very small. Just about 1% of those kids were taking advantage of services. So we recognized that we need to engage our stakeholders, service providers, educators, people in the mental health community, but most of all, kids from ages 16 to 25 or 14 to 18, to really talk with them about what are the services that are most relevant to you, what are the services that help you, how can you be involved and engaged. And I think that one of the issues and one of the things we as adults need to be aware of when we're serving kids, our interventions need to be developmentally appropriate.
Yes.
You know, mental health issues aside, whatever your intervention is, it needs to be developmentally appropriate. So let's not lose the forest for the trees. Let's remember what's important to people of that age group. They don't want to be treated as patients.
Right.
They want to be active participants in what they're doing. Their peer group is the most important intervention and relationships for them. So how can we engage people in services, mental health treatment, that doesn't treat people like patients, that utilizes the primary connection of peers, that's relevant to their generation, particularly on the social media front, which you know a lot about.
Yes.
So the grant really looks at disseminating what we know about best practices for serving that particular age, disseminating information around what is a relevant service for that age group, disseminating information and training that really is generated from entities such as a transitional age advisory group, so on and so forth, so that we can really inform providers, inform educators, and really get our kids in the mix of, just like we're attempting to do on the adult side, of having the services that we deliver being designed and delivered by the people that are serving them. And I think we can apply those same premises to transitional age youth.
Right, and I think the strength is really listening to the young adults and helping them kind of move forward. We just had on Lewis from the Home from Little Wonders, who did a fantastic job about saying that's what made a difference in his life, is that people listened to him and they were there to support him. And I think DMH is really doing a great job in really letting the individual, the participant, really be the expert. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's why we try to actualize what's in our mission. We do a lot of things, but we want to do them in partnership with the people we're serving.
Yes.
Whether they're families with young children, whether they're transitional age youth, who really have a very, very powerful voice and need to be at the table, whether they're people we serve, adults we serve who have children, or whether they're adults. We need our services to be informed and driven by the people we serve.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's particularly relevant to that age group.
Yeah, it really makes a difference with the transition age youth, because they're at a point where they really need to be heard and they're not quite sure how to initiate their voice. Right, exactly.
And we know certain things about kids of any age that experience issues with mental health. They have a 50% greater probability of dropping out of school, greater probability of becoming engaged with correctional authorities, not in a good way.
You're right.
And you know, there's a much greater likelihood that they will become dependent on social service systems.
Yes.
And nobody grows up thinking, I want to live my life as a mental health consumer.
Right, I want to be a patient when I grow up.
I want to be a patient when I grow up. I want to be dependent on social service agencies. What transitional age youth want are the same things we all want when we're that age. We want meaningful employment, we want meaningful education, we want independent housing, we want to be connected with our peer group.
Yes.
And we need to put services in place that support kids to get the services they need to stabilize their mental health conditions and move towards recovery.
Right.
That can support their getting stable housing, so on and so forth. What we do know, and this goes back to the whole Maslow hierarchy, and this applies to any age, unless people are safe, unless they have stable housing, unless their basic needs are met, it's only then that they can move on to address issues like substance abuse and mental health.
Absolutely. So it's, and everyone wants to kind of go forward and achieve their vision and their dreams, and they don't want to kind of be maintained. They want to figure out, well, what do you want? What do I want out of life, and how can I be supported in that? And
right.
That's a key piece.
Right. We want to make sure that our services are developed in such a way to encourage empowerment, to encourage people to use their voice, to encourage independence, self-sufficiency, and self-mastery over what skills does it take to get successfully through school, to get a job, to maintain your housing, to have friends, to build relationships. We're really focused on self-sufficiency and self-empowerment.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Now, I know you were very involved in the community-based flexible supports, the development of that. That's been a very successful program for DMH, and can you tell us about that?
Community-based flexible supports, or what we call CBFS, is a redesign of our entire community-based system. And what we tried to do with that procurement is to incorporate, or to use a term, bake in, values that were very important to us. One is the ability to be flexible and adjust services as the needs of people change. The other is to infuse a very strong and powerful peer workforce. The other is to place a major emphasis on employment and the use of person-centered planning, which basically empowers the consumer to be a full and active, not only participant on their treatment team and treatment planning, but to take ownership and responsibility for their recovery. So that's sort of the premise behind community-based flexible supports. It offers a very broad range of services. We do have community CBFS supports that are specific to certain populations. We have one in Western Mass that is focused on transitional age youth. We also have one in our metro suburban area and also in our northeast area. Because if you're 20 years old, you don't want to be hanging out with people who are 55. Right. Not that there's anything wrong with us, right. But we need to blur the lines between adult and children's services. So historically, if you were in the child and adolescent services, you might have a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old together. And then when you cross over the line into adult services, you might have an 18-year-old and a 60-year-old. I mean, we need to be more flexible. We need to step away from those really rigid, bureaucratic, false barriers.
Kind of archaic definitions or subsets. Yeah.
Right. And make sure that our services are developmentally appropriate, they're culturally appropriate, and they're effective to the individual that's receiving them. And that, in fact, we need to hear from people, is this the kind of service you want? Is this what you need?
Right.
And is this helping you get to where you want to go? It's about asking people, where do you want to get?
Right, and it's so powerful to ask the individual, because we could spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of support, like we sometimes do with children, and we think it's what they need,
right.
And because they're children, we're going to do the best that we can. But when a young adult starts to define who they are and what they want, if we can help them develop their voice and help support their choices, well, the money's going to be much better spent, the energy and the resources and the outcomes are going to be that much more fantastic.
Right.
Like in my experience, when you work with a young adult and they come to the point where they trust you, then and they know that you're going to support them, you just have to step back. As Lewis talked about from the Home for Little Wanderers, he said he had a mentor he knew would be there for him, but he forged forward on his own. But it was nice to know that when he needed that support or needed that guidance, it was there. And I think that's how the system is changing, thankfully,
right.
and making a big difference.
We want to change the entire system to be like that. But when you are serving 20,000 people and you have 2,000 employees, it's a sea change. Yes. But what's really incredible is that the transitional age youth are a great place to start.
Yes, yes.
Because they're so inspirational.
Yes.
They're not necessarily shy.
No,
they're
not at all.
willing to take risks.
Yes.
So, I like to focus on employment. So I'd like to have our 300 case managers ask our 3,000 people who are case managed, when they meet someone, do you ask them, do they want a job?
Right.
If they could just make that one change rather than saying, this is what I think you need. Making that kind of systemic change is hard, but when you plant a seed, like with the transitional age youth, and it really ripples out.
It does. It really makes a huge difference.
And for the first time, I think when we see the effectiveness and the hope and the great achievements from our transitional age youth, it inspires the entire system. For people who, and adults in the system, who don't necessarily have hope that they can recover,
yes,
and are working with professionals who don't have hope that they can recover, because we're going to see a new generation of folks that we're serving, and we're not going to be serving them for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
We don't want to, nor do they want to be served for the rest of their lives. They need supports. They need services that are going to help transition them to independence and self-sufficiency.
Yes, no, absolutely. Some of the work that I've been privileged to be involved in has helped put peer mentors at Worcester State Hospital.
Right.
And the peers have done more work for recovery. There's one young woman that was a patient there and struggled with severe psychiatric disabilities or mental health issues. And she's come back as a peer, and now she's at college and in a nursing program and doing fantastic. So she comes every summer and comes in the winter and works. And she's done more to help the staff see that recovery is possible. And then not to mention what she does. The young adults stand up a little straighter when she comes and says, wow, she's in school, she has a boyfriend, she's on campus, that's what I want. I want that piece of it. And it sparks everyone.
Right.
And then you're in a meeting with her, and I was just in a meeting the other day with Ed Wang from the Department of Mental Health, and he said, there's so much energy in this room about cultural competence. And he said, and people kind of looked at him and he said, this is a no level of energy. People are excited about responding to the needs, and because the young adults were driving the meeting.
Right.
And the young adults felt it. We were, really responding to what they were saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's an exciting time to be part of the Department of Mental Health.
It really is very exciting. And we don't want to stop just with infusing peers into the treatment design and treatment delivery. We really want to infuse peers as well into our entire staff development.
Absolutely.
Imagine being an entry-level worker in a state hospital, mental health worker. You don't really know much about mental illness. You have, just the pictures in your head that you see in the movies and you hear, and you have someone in your new staff orientation standing in front of you and saying, I've been a patient in this hospital, and this is what it was like for me. And this is what helped, and this is what didn't help, and this is how you can help me, and this is what I need. And now, I left the hospital, and I have my own apartment, I have a significant other, and I'm doing this important work impacting the treatment of mental health consumers all over the state. So we really want to infuse the peer and consumer voice in all areas of our treatment delivery system.
Right, and I think it's a fantastic model, and you've done very well with the parent partners. You want to talk about what they've done in the state?
Yeah, our parent partners are one of our peer type of interventions. So when you're working with a child, you're also working with a family.
Right.
And I can speak from experience that it's very difficult to have a child with a mental illness, especially a transitional age youth child, because you don't know what's normal adolescence, what's the mental health
normal,
condition?
right?
What is normal?
Who would want to know a normal kid, right? They'd polish their shoes, they'd make their bed. It'd be so boring. We don't know anyone who's normal.
Should I let them make a mistake? Should I not?
Yes.
Are the consequences going to be too great?
Right.
So it really helps to have another parent to talk to who's experienced that can help you, first of all, navigate the bureaucracies.
Yes.
We at state agencies don't make it sometimes very helpful for families to try to find the front door.
It's not fun to fill out lots of forms?
No, and fill them out over and over again.
And triplicate? Yeah.
You know, and tell the same people the same story, different people the same story over and over again. And, we as state agencies really need to do a better job at, working collaboratively together so we don't burden families as much. So just getting in the front door and learning to negotiate the bureaucracies, not just in the state system, but on the private system. How do you deal with acute hospitalizations? How do you deal with your insurance company? How do you deal with the school system? There are so many points of our system that touch kids that start having trouble. Criminal justice system, so on and so forth. To have a parent to talk to that can help you negotiate that, but can also just empathize with how painful and difficult it is. Just like kids grow up and say, well, I didn't envision my life as a mental health consumer or a patient. As a parent, you don't quite envision that you're going to have a child with mental illness either. There's a lot of feelings of anger. There's a lot of feelings of loss. There is, it's very hard to accept. And the more quickly you have someone that can talk to you and talk about what it was like for them, then you can really help your child. But not just, when you have a child with mental illness, it just doesn't affect the child, it affects every single member of the family.
Right, absolutely. And that compassion factor can be huge.
Right.
I've known a lot of parent advocates, and I've helped some parent advocates become parent advocates. And you listen to the parents, and they just said that level of compassion and that level of empathy has really helped them kind of bring to acceptance and be able to focus on the needs of the child.
Right, and you can get hope that their child has improved or not.
Yes.
You get inspiration and strength from them. So it's a very valuable service, and it's a very valuable function. And it's, imagine having a child with mental illness and going out and reaching out and giving out. So I think it's valuable both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a super act of generosity and compassion.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's so nice to see the mental health movement kind of embracing helping other people. And that's really a model that we've used, whether you're running a marathon, which we've known you've done, or participating in the Olympics and things like that, which we know you've been a part of. You want that type of support to someone who's been there, done that, and been able to say, this is how I've moved forward, both my successes and my challenges.
Right.
It's a really critical piece.
And, I would just want to put a plug in for prevention.
Yes.
We really need to focus on prevention and not wait till people start exhibiting symptoms. And when you're young, it's a great time to learn that. At the department, we talk a lot about self-regulation, about managing your symptoms, managing your anxiety, managing your relationships, managing your depression. So we talk a lot about giving people skills for self-regulation. I mean, I do run marathons, and so that shows you how much self-regulation I need.
Right, self-discipline, absolutely.
But more self-regulation, because that makes me feel better.
Right.
And people can learn those more functional skills earlier rather than getting hospitalized.
Yes.
And becoming professional patients. And I think the more we focus on prevention with mental health issues, the same way we focus on prevention with health.
Absolutely.
And stop waiting for symptoms to present themselves. And I think communities really need to work in partnership, state agencies, school systems, communities really need to work together in an integrated partnership to support and do preventative activities, and stop focusing on risk factors and really incorporate the notion of universal precaution.
Yes.
Because if you look at the risk factors, trauma, loss, poverty, well, when you go through the list, everybody's experienced one or more of those.
Yes.
So let's stop trying to figure out who's at risk and who's not, and look at what are our curriculums in our service agencies. What are our curriculums in our prenatal? Does your prenatal doctor ask you about mental health? Does your pediatrician ask you about mental health? Are your teachers and your school systems trained to do preventative curriculums around social skills and so on and so forth?
Fantastic, and I think that's a great point to end on, is to really help people remember on Children's Mental Health Awareness Day that we need to begin with prevention.
Yes.
The services come afterwards, but let's focus on prevention and how we can help all children and young adults really get launched off in a fantastic direction with the preventative pieces in place. I'd like to say thank you very much, Commissioner Marcia Fowler, for being with us to celebrate Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for celebrating with us.
Thank you. And I'd like to say thank you very much to our audience for tuning in once again to Picking Up the Pieces. And I'd like you to look out for that special someone that might be in need of that extra support so you can help them reach their full potential. We'd like to say thank you to the Department of Mental Health for sponsoring our show and hope that you have a wonderful day. Enjoy.